You probably have seen this code before. Multiple components, but each of the component having their own loading, having their own error handling, and maybe having their own authentication handling mechanism. Now, instead of repeating across each of this component, what if we could create a wrapper component which could handle the loading, error scenario, authentication scenario, data fetching scenario, which are common in a single place, centralized base. Hey everyone, this is Tapas. Welcome to the day 5 of 15 days of React design patterns. And today our session is about higher order components. Yes, higher order component, also known as HOC, is a function that takes a component and return a new component. Okay, in other words, it's like a component factory that adds certain new features, new enhancement to an existing component and return that enhanced component to you. As usual, let us first check what are we going to learn today. First, we are going to learn about HOF and HOC. What are these things? HOF is nothing but higher order function, which is the basis of creating higher order component, which is nothing but HOC. So look into HOF and HOC both. Then we will learn how HOC, higher order component, in the context of React helps in sharing logic. We will definitely look into a few real world examples as we do in each of the design pattern session. Then we'll talk about use cases, we'll talk about pitfalls, what are the other modern alternatives and why the alternatives exist. And then finally, we'll end this video with the task. Again, as usual, I always suggest you that finish the task of the previous session before you get started with the next session so that your learning become very solid. And today we are going to learn about higher order component in such a way that you're never ever going to forget about it. Don't forget to subscribe though. Please subscribe to tapaScript. Support me, support this channel. And if you have already subscribed to it, you are really fantastic and awesome. The word higher order simply means take one and return one. Whether you are talking about a function or a component, the term higher order means the same thing conceptually. In JavaScript, a higher order function is a function that takes another function as input and return a new one. If you have taken the 40 days of JavaScript, in the function session, we have discussed about higher order function in depth with example. But let us see one of the example of plain old JavaScript higher order function so that we learn about higher order components much faster and much deeper. In JavaScript, a higher order function is a function that does either of these things. One, takes another function as an argument. So a function takes another function as an argument or return a function from it. Return a function from it or can do both, taking another function as an argument and return a function from it. If that is the case, if any of these three scenarios satisfied, we will call that function as a higher order function. Now the function that we are seeing on the screen is a higher order function. Why? Because this function with logging can take another function as an argument. You're seeing over here is taking another function as an argument. Not only that, it is able to return a function from here. So from the with login function, we are returning another function. How can I say this fn is a function? Is it just because the name is fn, so why? No, that's not the case, because the function that is with logging returning, if you just take a look into this, you see this line over here. The function that I was passing as an argument to with login, we are able to execute it over here with any number of arguments that we can pass to this, right? So now this is a very reusable method that fn can be any function. It can be for adding two numbers, it is for subtracting, it is for drawing a pyramid, it can be anything as such, any function that you can pass. And not only that, you can execute that function with any number of arguments. But that's not it. While returning this function from here, along with executing this function, we are also able to log the result. So this function is not only executing a function that we are passing as an argument, it is also doing something extra. Now, if I want to use this function with logging with an example, how am I going to do it? Let's take a function called add and let's do add of two numbers. Very simple function. I can do return a plus b and then I close this up. So this is my function add. Now I can call with logging and then pass the add function to it, isn't it? Can't I do that? Yes, I can definitely do that. So now with this one, with this execution, where am I passing another function add to with logging, what it is going to do, it is going to return me another function, isn't it? So I will take that output, the return value, into a variable called logged at. Simple JavaScript, there's no React yet. The foundation of JavaScript is very important for you to master React. If you are coming to React directly, guys, please pause, go back to 40 days of JavaScript, do it, come to React. Okay, so const log that equals to with logging and add. So this is going to return me what? With logging, when I'm passing a function as an argument, is going to return me another function. That function is now inside this particular variable. Now log that is a function that is great. This is the function which can take any number of arguments. So I can pass log that any number of arguments. So it means now this log that 2 and 3, these two arguments, now going to go over here, and with this 2 and 3, this add that I have passed over here with login will be executed over here. So my result will be now 5. If I execute this guy, my result is 5. But it is not only executing, it is also doing some logging, saying calling the function with arguments 2 and 3, and then result is 5. So it is not only doing the execution, it is doing something extra. So it means with the higher order function, we are able to do something extra along with the execution of a particular functionality. Here functionality is add. So you do adding, you do subtraction, you do draw a pyramid, you do a Fibonacci series, you do anything. But one common thing, which is logging, is reusable and placed inside this higher order function. That's exactly the higher order function is. It returns a new function with an extra behavior and enhancement, so that that extra behavior and the enhancement is not duplicated across multiple function. It used as a reusable aspect of the higher order function. I hope you're very clear about higher order function, isn't it? With that, let us now look into higher order components. Let's imagine that we have three components. One is a square component, one is a star component, another is a cylindrical component. Okay. Now each of these component has its own property. For example, square, all four sides are equal. We know star is a star shape, cylindrical having cylindrical properties and everything. Now we want to enhance each of this component with something common. Let's say that is color. So for example, I want to change the color of the square from blue to red. I want to change the color of the star from green to red. And I want to also change the color of the cylinder from yellow to red. So what is happening? I am changing one particular property of each of this component, which is color, to something which is common. It means I have a set of input components and I want a set of output components, but with some enhancements. Please, these terms are very important for you to understand HOC. Enhanced component, input component, enhanced feature. What is the enhanced feature here? The color is very, very important. Okay, I will get to that. So now, as the enhancement is important to us, but one other factor is also important to us is called reusability. For each of this component of different shape, different color, making certain common changes on top of that can happen in the component itself. Inside the blue component itself, you can make the blue to red. Inside the green star, you can make the green to red. Similar thing for the cylinder. Or it can happen somewhere in common. And instead of the logic that turn the property from blue to red staying inside the component itself, imagine that we take that out somewhere, like that particular slab is there, no, turn to red, you are able to see. And then this component, the blue square, the green star, the yellow cylinder, goes through this particular slab of code and then comes out as the enhanced component. Okay. So the blue square goes through this slab of turn it to red and comes out as that red square. So this slab that is there in between, the layer, we say turn it to red, does some magic to turn this particular square to red. Same thing happened to the star. Exactly the same thing happened to this particular cylinder also. But here one change is, unlike before, where the logic for turning this attribute to red was inside each of this component, now we have taken that out into a common place that is in the middle, which is saying turn it to red. Now, if you understood what I'm trying to say, you now understand what is reusability and the enhancement means. The reusable piece of code is now in the middle, and the left side of the components we call is at input component, and the right side of the components we call it as enhanced component, and all the reusable code stays in the middle. If you understand this picture, this is exactly what higher order component is. Let's talk about this movie app, what it is. Let's consider I have a data store somewhere, right? A simple application where you have a backend data store. In front of that, you have some API. You fetch certain data and render it on the UI, right? Let's imagine we have a data store. This is the data store you are able to see on your screen. And this data store is where movie data are stored. Okay. Now I have a component. This particular component is supposed to render the list of movies. So what it does, it makes an API call. So there is an API that fetch the data from this data store, movie data store. So it makes an API call. And once it makes the API call for a certain period of time, there will be rendering of the UI. And once the data comes back, we'll be able to see this movie list over here. Okay. So at the top, when the data was getting fetched, it was showing certain kind of loading indicator. That's what we're seeing at the top. And once the data is fetched, you're able to see the movie list at the bottom. Fine. So I have a component called movie list, which fetch the data, shows it. Now there is another component where I have to show certain movie analytics. In this component that you are seeing on your screen, we are seeing the movie list, matrix, Lord of the Rings, etc. But I also need another component which shows on the same data, same movie data, but the analytics data. Okay. So for that also, what I'll do, I have another component that makes the call. It started loading, and once the call gets over, it comes back with the analytics data. Now here you're seeing the movie analytics like total movie 7, average rating, blah, blah, blah. Now what exactly happened over here? I have a data store, both movie list component and movie analytics component made the same API call because it's getting the same data. After getting the data, it is doing some manipulation based on what exactly it is supposed to render. Simple. It's not doing anything more than that. Now, think about it. What exactly duplicate here? Of course, the duplication that we have made over here is that API call that is both the movie list and the movie analytics component making respectively. Can't we create something like a wrapper which will take care of handling this call? And while it is taking care of handling this call, it can also take care of the loading state, it can take care of the error scenario, and once the data is baked, somehow it can pass the data to the movie list component, to the movie analytics component. Tomorrow there could be a third component, even to the third component. So can we take out this data calling, data fetching logic along with the loading state, error state, all this logic, and put them into one component, wrapper component, and then use the wrapper component along with the movie list and the movie analytics component and make it happen? Can we bring the reusability? Yes, we can. How? This is how you can bring the reusability. Same data store again. You have the movies stored into the data, and I have two component, left side movie list, right side the movie analytics. Now what happened? We have now again got that middle layer. All the data fetching logic we are going to put inside this fetch movies layer. Now what will happen? This guy, fetch movies, can interact with this data store directly through APIs and can get the movie data. The arrow shows like that. So whatever the component need this movie data can now directly interact with these fetch movies. Once things gets loaded and comes back, we get this component baked with the data. So the data fetching logic now no more resides inside the movie list component. Rather, it is taken out and placed somewhere centralized, which act as a wrapper component which has already have the capability to fetch the data, and any component need the data can use it as a wrapper component. Similarly, for the movie analytics, it's going to get over here. Okay, loading happening. Once that data is back, I am able to show the movie analytics data. So on the contrary to the previous diagram that we had where each of the component was handling the data fetching logic, we had taken out the data fetching logic altogether, placed it in a centralized location, and then utilizing that as a wrapper component to make our job done. That's exactly what higher order component is. And if you want to now bring the similarity of higher order component with higher order function, remember what the higher order function with logging was doing. With logging was taking a function as an argument and returning an enhanced function. It could take add, subtract, multiplication, division as an argument, could return a new function that was not only doing this addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, but also was able to do certain kind of logging. In this case, it's exactly the same thing. A higher order component is a kind of higher order function because in React today, we are writing everything using functions. Each of the components at the bottom is nothing but plain old JavaScript function. So a higher order component is a kind of function that can take another component, which is also a function, as an argument, okay, and then can return a new component which is a function which is enhanced. Same thing happening. The movie list component, the bare metal movie list component can be passed as an argument to fetch movies higher order component and return a new enhanced movie list component with all the data rendered. Can you see that in code? So guys, do you remember that fake APIs project that I have mentioned in the initial days of this 15 days of React design patterns? You can go to repositories. By the way, feel free to follow tapaScript. There are a lot of interesting projects. There is something called fake APIs. This is one of the interesting projects that you might want to look into. So what fake APIs give you? It gives you a bunch of APIs, like you want users, you want posts, you want categories, etc. Like that, I have now added movies. And running it locally is pretty simple. Just clone it or fork it, do your npm install, and then do npm run dev. That's it. And once you do that, it makes the API available. Here I've included the fake APIs, and I'm going to just do yarn dev or npm run dev. Anything is fine. And this is going to run the API server locally. You see that this many APIs are running. Now, please use this for any purpose that you want. And if you like the work, give a star to that repository. That will be really great to have. So we are going to copy these movies and we're going to try out these movies. So let us go and try out slash API slash movies. All right. So we see a bunch of movies as a response that is coming out. Now, whatever we have seen in the diagram, right? Having a higher order component which deals with this data fetching. And then there are other components can use the higher order component as a wrapper to get this data and render the data. We're going to code exactly that. Let's get to VS Code. I've created a folder called day05, and inside this, I'm creating a new React project. If you are following all the previous videos, you know this process already, no rocket science. So I've given the project name as HOC-pattern, which means it is like our higher order component pattern. So you can see the HOC-pattern, the project has been created. So let's go inside this folder. Let's install all the required libraries using npm install or yarn install. Great, it is done. Let's do a yarn dev. And I can see this is running on localhost 5173. Let me access this. All right, I'm able to see the UI, which I'm going to take away in a while. Now under src, let's create a new folder called movies. Inside this movies folder, we are going to create that movie list. We are going to create the movie analytics. And of course, we are also going to create our higher order component. Okay. So first thing first, the movie list component, which is going to be pretty simple. Let's create that. New file, movie list.jsx. One of the most simple React component, which takes the data. Of course, it's a movie data. Let's assume that. And then it is an array. We have seen from the API that it gives an array of movies. So it iterates through that array, take out each of the movie and create an li using the movie title and the movie year. So it means it can show the movie title and beside that in a parenthesis the movie year. That's how it lists all the movies. Very simple React component. I hope there is nothing more to explain. Of course, it has got a heading and a bunch of style to make it look little better. Understood the movie list component. Now let us create one movie analytics component. You can right click on movies. Let's do movie analytics.jsx. But before we start getting the code, let us go to the API once. Now, if you look into this, each of these movies, so this is an array of movies, each of these movies having something called a rating, correct? This is having a rating, this is having a rating, this is having a rating. Now let's show an analytics, a very basic analytics. One is how many movies are there in our data store. Of course, we have 9 movies. There are 9 objects over here. And what is the average rating? That means you are going to add up all the ratings of all the movies and divide by 9. Whenever we want to do something like that in JavaScript, we know we have to use the reduce method of array, correct? So get the data basically, which is nothing but an array, run the reduce on top of it, get the average rating. Very simple. Hence my movie analytics component is simple also. What it is doing, data.length means the movie array's length, total movies number is 9, average rating with the reduce of JavaScript array. Again, if you are new to array, if you don't know how to use reduce, you should go back to JavaScript and study from anywhere or from 40 days of JavaScript, so that you understand what are the different ways you can use different use case of reduce and etc. Okay. So for now, what it is doing, it is accumulating or adding all the rating from each of the movies and then dividing by the total number of movies to get the average rating, and then simply rendering the average rating and the total number of movies. That's it. Very, very simple 2 component. Now what you have seen so far, none of this component making any kind of API call. but they are expecting data as a prop. So it means that if anyone can send them the movie data, as long as the structure is something compliance, it can render the movie list, it can render the analytics data. This is where now we'll be creating our higher order component, which we are saying is a wrapper component. And the reusable part, especially the data fetching part, the loading part, the error handling part, what it will abstract out from each of this component and keep it in a single place. Okay, so let us first create the higher order component. For that purpose, inside movies, let's create a folder called HOC, and under HOC a new file called with data fetching. Now you might be wondering, why am I using this word called with? Whenever I have created a higher order function, I used it as with logging. Here I am saying with data fetching. Yeah, this is a convention. If you don't name it in this way, still fundamentally it will remain a higher order component if you write it like a higher order component, or a higher order function if you don't name it as with logging. But if you name in this way, anyone reading your code tomorrow will know it very easily that this is a higher order component. If it is React, if it was plain JavaScript with logging, oh, it's a higher order function. So that naming convention is pretty important. All right, let's code this. Now, first thing first, we want to make an API call. So we need definitely use effect for API call, and we have to manage some state. So we need use state. So let's import use state and the use effect straight away. Now let's define the function, the component export function. The name of the component is with data fetching. Now here is the twist. This component takes an argument. Again, going back to the definition of higher order function. Higher order function is a function which can take the function as an argument, can return another function as a return value. Higher order component is a component which can take one component as an argument, can return an enhanced component as a return value. So higher order component can take another component as an argument, so it expects another component over here. Okay, so this can be any React component. We are calling it as wrapped component, and it returns another component from it. So that means return. In React, a component is nothing but a function. You can give any name with data fetching component, and it returns a component. Now this component can accept props, so let's pass props, and now you can do inside this component anything that you want. Now can you start imagining this? In any other component or app.jsx or wherever, I can import with data fetching, I can import movie list, I can pass movie list as an argument to with data fetching, and use that movie list inside this component, which is anyway getting returned with all the data that I'll be fetching now. So all the data fetching logic should happen inside this. Once the data is fetched, that data can be passed to this wrapped component. And once this component is getting returned, after the calling of this, it is getting not only the component that I have passed, but along with the data that I'll be doing. So let's do fun, right? So for that purpose, I have to do things with data, loading, and error. So let's create 3 states. First state is to handle data, second state is to handle loading, third state is to handle error. Next, we need an use effect. Let's do this callback, and let's put a dependency. Now I will create one more thing over here inside our HOC pattern. Let's create a new file called .env, and one environment variable we can put is like our API base URL, right? So that we don't have to repeat it, in multiple places in case it is required. Now over here, we have to make an async call. So let's create a function, async function call async fetch data, and then call the fetch data over here. All our data fetching logic is going to be inside async fetch data. We have to handle error. So let's do a try catch error, and always a great practice to have a finally for error handling. So whenever there is an error, we have the set error, isn't it? So we can do set error dot message set. Whenever we start our call, the call happens, we have to make sure that we are setting this loading as true, so which is already marked as true. So that means once the call is done, whether it's an error or success scenario, we will make set loading as false. Great. So these two scenarios we have taken care, loading and error. Now only thing remaining is this scenario where we'll be making the actual call. So for that purpose, we'll do await fetch, and our API is /API/movies, localhost 3001 /API/movies. Localhost 3001 is already in the .env file. So I can pass the URL like my API base URL, then /API/movies. Now whatever it returns, I can take it inside something called a response. Then if the response is not okay, we can throw an error, say fail to fetch data. Otherwise, let's get the result back. from this response.json, it returns another promise. So we need await over here. And as I have the result, now I can make use of this set data and I can pass the result. Beautiful. So I have handled the data part, I have handled the error part, I have handled the loading part. Everything is seamless, everything is done. So my use effect is great, it is done. Now let's do the enhancing component part. The first thing, if it is loading, in that case, I want to return a JSX which says loading data. Okay. Similarly, if it is error, if there is an error, I want to return another JSX which says the error message. Now if the loading and error, none of them are happening, in that case I want to return that component that I have passed as an argument, my wrapped component, with the data that I have received now using this fetch call over here, and I have set it over here. So this data, and if there are any other additional props that were passed. Now, this is the power that I was talking about. Look at here. This is a plain function. In React is a component, of course, because it's dealing with JSX, which takes another component and return a brand new component, returning this brand new component. But within this brand new component, it is doing certain things extra. What is extra it is doing? It is doing the data fetching. This is extra what it is doing. It is taking care of the loading state. It is taking care of the error state. And after that, this particular component that you have passed, it is enhancing that with the data that it has got inside and all other props. Now, think about it. You can now call this with data fetching by passing this movie list, and movie list is automatically getting this movie data. Awesome. You can pass movie analytics. Movie analytics will automatically get this movie data. Great. And not only that, this is also handling the loading and error in a centralized place. Awesome, isn't it? So this is why this higher order components, this particular design pattern is and was really, really strong and helpful. I hope you understand like how it is enhancing a particular component with data, loading and error over here. Now, can we use this higher order component? Yes, we can. So under movies folder, let's create another file called movie with hoc.jsx. Okay, so movie with hoc, let us first import the with data fetching our higher order component. And after that, let us import movie list and movie analytics, those two components. Now we want to enhance this movie list and movie analytics with this with data fetching, right? Let's do that. So what we're going to do, we are going to wrap both the components with the same higher order components. So first thing is with data fetching, pass this movie list and get a brand new component, because with data fetching returns a new component called movie list with data. Okay. This is the power. Exactly similar thing we can do for movie analytics. We can pass the movie analytics component to with data fetching. It will be enhanced with the data. So movie analytics with data. Now it's time that we create this component movie with HOC. Okay. And in the JSX of it, we can use this movie list with data and movie analytics with data. Simple. So if you look into it, how simple it is. You passed movie list. Now movie list goes inside with data fetching. With data fetching gets movie list, gets the data, and then updated the movie list with the data, and then return the brand new component that you are getting, which is movie list with data. This is what the higher order component, a component that can takes another component as an argument and can return a brand new enhanced component. What we understood. Now we'll go to our app.jsx and we're going to remove everything that is there. First thing first, we are going to import movie with HOC, and then going to use this component movie with HOC over here. So movie with HOC, now going to render movie list with data, movie analytics with data, which is our pass through our higher order component with data, supposed to come up with data. Let's go to the UI and let's go to this. Awesome. We are able to see this. This is my movie list and this is my movie analytics. This is really great. So if I just do a refresh, you're seeing loading data for both of them and the data part comes into picture. This is what higher order component and its implementation, guys. I hope you liked it. Talking about the use case, we use higher order components when multiple components share the same logic, such as handling loading, handling error state, authentication, permission checks, logging scenarios, analytics data, data fetching wrappers. We have seen that example over here. So instead of copy pasting the logic everywhere, we wrap components with the reusable behavior. I have given multiple examples. One with the color changing, one is the data fetching. The data fetching part we have coded with the movie APIs. I guess that you are able to understand like why we are bringing this higher order component into picture. See, higher order components are powerful. We have seen the power, right? But there are few things that you need to watch out for. And also, before you go there, you need to remember that you might find higher order component mostly in the legacy code. Means that people needed this reusability. People needed enhancing components. And they had few patterns that time. One was render props, we have discussed in the last session, and then this higher order components. But today, we have a modern replacement of it, which is hook. That is what is our next session is about, where we are going to understand the problem that render props pattern and the higher order component pattern brings, and what hook solves, and how to get into creating custom hooks. Most powerful thing in React today, I would say. So that's next session. But what are the problem at a high level that we can touch base today about higher order component? One of the major problem that I find is like when you have to nest too many higher order components, that makes debugging really, really hard. We also call it as a composition hell. Like where we are composing one higher order component to another higher order component means that one higher order component is giving a return of an enhanced component, then passing that to another higher order component, getting another enhanced component. It's really difficult to debug that kind of code. Then another problem, again, it's about the plain old JavaScript, nothing to do with React. Like if your wrapped component has any static methods, then they don't carry over automatically. That's a problem. You lose those static methods. That's why React later introduced hooks and render props as an alternative. And then render props gotten out of the picture because hooks and the custom hooks kind of solving all the drawbacks that both of this pattern has, which we are going to discuss in next session. But still, I would say higher order component is still very, very useful in many existing libraries and the legacy code bases. You never know when you are going to stumble upon on a code piece that is using this pattern, and you have to understand and probably need to enhance it. Time for task, guys. So what is the task? The task is to create a higher order component that injects user data and handles permission based access into a component. So handling the user data, handling user having what kind of permission, admin permission, normal user permission, writer permission, reader permission, different kind of permission, right? Now this check, if it happens in every component, is kind of repeating the logic. Instead of that is the time that you can use this pattern to make sure that the reusability stays in one place and you can enhance your component with all those reusable aspects. So the goal is to learn how to wrap existing components with cross-cutting logic like authentication or roles without rewriting them. Now, what you need to do, you have to build an admin dashboard for a React app that has multiple pages. Now, in this page, don't try to add many things. Just add profile page 1, H1, admin panel 1, H1, reports page and H1. That's it. Enough. So a profile page displayed logged in users info. Okay, just the name and it says profile page. Admin panel visible only to admin. It can just say admin panel. That is enough. And then a reports page visible only to users with report permission. So you are dealing with three permission. One is admin, another is report, another is normal user. You already have this component. So create very basic, like we have the movie list and the movie analytics component, very basic components. But each one needs to fetch the user data, check permissions, and conditionally render the UI. Correct, na? Each component has to do this. Now, instead of that, this repeated logic, you can take it out as a higher order component. So you need to do this. Create a higher order component name with user data and permissions. It starts with because it's a higher order component. This higher order component should fetch the user data, simulate with static object, check if the user has a required permission. So you can create a JSON basically with permission and role, everything. Keep that with you. Don't have to call any API. Do it from the JSON itself. And once you submit this task, if the JSON data looks good, I'm going to take that into our fake APIs. Okay. Or you can also submit a pull request in the fake APIs if I'm going to merge that pull request. Inject user data and permission status as props into the wrapped component. Okay. Then wrap the existing component. Then each component should render differently with this data. That's what you're going to do. And then share this task on our Discord. Coming to Discord, everything is available under 15 days of React design pattern. You can start any discussion, ask any question to me. I'll definitely get back with answer. Once you're done with the task, please post your task assignments over here so that we can look into it. The community can look into it. Please subscribe to tapaScript if you have not done already. Follow tapaScript organization over here. Go to the repository called 15 days of React design patterns. Don't forget to start this repo. That will mean a lot. Thank you very much. Take a great care of yourself and don't miss the next one. It's about hook. If you want to be successful coding in React, you have to master hook. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the next session. Take care.